Hello, this is Conan Stoops and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video, and today's video is on Prawnu, a definition of a very niche Lumion in its role, but a Lumion that is also very good at that niche. Prawnu has many attributes that will warrant its use throughout the metagame, but it also does have a lot of unique traits that it has that will differentiate itself from other Lumions. So let's talk about that. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to use and counter Prawnu. From the counters and checks and teammates that you'll need to know in order to use Prawnu on your teams and in the Battle Coliseum, as well as knowing the roles and the sets in order to team build around Prawnu. Today's video is all about how to use and counter Prawnu. So the role that Prawnu is going to play is a very simple question to ask, and we can answer it with its base stats. Its base stats are really simple, with knowing that you have very bad melee defense and HP. It doesn't need a genius to tell any of you that these are one of the lowest combinations of bulk for an offensive Lumion. This basically means that Prawnu is going to be a glass cannon whenever it's on the battlefield. And yes, I said glass cannon because it has one of the highest range attack stats for non-Uber Lumions, or non-Roamer Lumions for that matter, that being 130 base range attack. It also does have a really good energy stat of 100, which means it will be able to throw out a bunch of moves with its range attack stat, meaning it's not going to be waiting or resting a lot. So most likely, if you play your Prawnu well, it's not going to be left out in the open to wait or rest. Its speed tier is also 92, and while this isn't the most fastest thing in the world, it does let you outspeed Lumions such as Shachi and Borak and Valkyrie and Halventic by its base stats alone. So, what role does Prawnu play exactly? Well, it's going to be a Lumion with a ton of wall breaking potential. Prawnu, with its wall breaking capabilities, does have the ability to break multiple walls, but because of its weak defenses and its somewhat lack of a good speed tier to outspeed almost most of the metagame, it's going to be weak to priority and weak to revenge killing, but not as weak as Lumions such as Soulburst, Eruptodon, and the other roamers of this update. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the set for Prawnu. So for anyone that knows what Gargolem Attack is, it's mainly going to be a Lumion that is going to run the Clutch plushie. This is going to be a very similar set. Because Prawnu has bad defenses, we're going to be utilizing its ability Clutch. This is mainly because Applied Frustration, its other ability, isn't really the greatest, and its other ability doesn't really work well with most of its moves, and because we are really frail, let's just save ourselves an item slot by running the ability Clutch. This will enable us to live one-hit KOs from walls and of course from other offensive Lumions and hit them back super effectively, and also it does provide ourselves as a really good way to actually clean the endgame if it comes down to us needing the ability Clutch. And our personality here: smart, nimble, very frail. Nimble is so we can outspeed just as much as we can while still being able to hit hard. If you do want to run very smart and focus Prawnu on more wall breaking stuff, then of course go right on ahead. Nimble, in my opinion, is just more consistent because it does let you outspeed some Lumions such as Declips and Wintrix with certain sets like your Nimble personality. And of course your moveset here: Feroblast and Shell Sharpenel, Boom Bash, and Peace of Mind. Peace of Mind is mainly because we don't really have a fourth move option. You can run other moves such as Accelerate or Tribute, but Peace of Mind here, this does let you live somewhat of some, have somewhat of some setup. In case you want to predict a swap, you can use Peace of Mind and now you're hitting even harder. Peace of Mind is basically a move that will give you high upside but somewhat low downside. If you were going to try and use Tribute, then of course replace it for Peace of Mind. Feroblast, Shell Sharpenel, and Boom Bash, this is mainly so we can have our diverse coverage, and we don't really get any other coverage, so these three moves are going to be pretty essential. And of course, your item of choice will be the Water Essence to increase your stab, and of course the TPs. 68 energy is mainly so we can use 1 Feroblast, 2 Boom Bashes, 1 Peace of Mind, and 2 Shell Sharpenels. This is a pretty common move order or a mixture of moves that you can do in your battle, so I think this energy investment is pretty good. And for its range attack and speed, we just want to max out those stats just as much as we can. And for its HP stat of 32, it's pretty much leftovers. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the offensive counters and checks, and of course the teammates that you want to run with Prawnsu. So offensive counters and checks are going to be very simple. You just want to run stuff that can outspeed this Lumion, which is pretty common actually. Nimble Ikazune and Boots Deladrix are going to be common Lumions that you could try and use against this thing. Tatab and Nevermare. Fun fact, Nevermare does swap in on 2 out of 3 of its attacking moves, so Nevermare is somewhat of a solid check against Prawnsu, and Zulong is just here because it can just outspeed it and hit it super effectively and kill it once the clutch ability is gone. But once that clutch up ability is gone and you probably don't have the HP for any of these Lumions to withstand another hit, you can use priority users such as Lightspeed Ray Chironix and Shadow Sprint Ursul and Besabaratu. There are other priority users such as Borak with Quick Pounce and some other stuff, but these main 3 are the main 3 viable priority users in this metagame. But just know that priority moves as a whole is going to be really good at stopping Prawnsu. However, we do have our defensive counters and checks, and while they are few and far in between, it is very important to know that Prawnsu can still break them even with peace of mind. Specifically, very clever Luminamis and Cleones, they're going to be wanting to run this personality so they can actually wall this thing. Venolin does get broken, but however, it does have the Barter Shackles trait, so it can trade away its item and then Prawnsu is just relegated useless for the whole entire match. So you can just swap in on Prawnsu. Hopefully it doesn't hit you. Just and then just Barter Shackles it, and then Prawnsu is now useless. Stratosaur and Chironix here, specifically the very clever forms, are going to be really good against Prawnsu. Mainly because these guys have the bulk and of course the attack power to withstand Prawnsu. These guys are going to be your best answers against it. And finally, your offensive and defensive teammates. Just like any frail offensive Lumion, you're going to be wanting to run wall breakers with it. Even though it does technically break most of its walls, running very good walls such as wall breakers such as Ikazune, Shachi, and Medito, they're going to be really good at breaking the stuff that you are weak to. Nomare is especially pretty good, not only because it does being able to take advantage of the Lumions I've said previously, but overall this does help it break Venolin and Pyrolin much more easier. And the same case goes for Jalusa, except it doesn't have the Flash and Flee pivot to actually do much of anything. But do note that Jalusa still has that X factor just like Nomare does. And finally, the defensive teammates, you just want to run hazards with these guys, and of course run hazard remover. I can't forget that, mainly because clutch plushie, or in this case the clutch ability, will not proc and will be disabled once its Prawnsu is on the battlefield when it swaps in on hazards. So Cleone and these other guys that can set up hazards and of course pivot it in is very great. Running hazard removers such as Gargolem Defense is also good for Prawnsu, just so Prawnsu's clutch ability doesn't get broken. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the conclusion and my thoughts on Prawnsu. So overall, Prawnsu looks to be a very solid Lumion in its role. It is very frail and that's going to be holding it back a lot, but because of how much damage it can actually dish out, Prawnsu is going to be an X factor and a threat whenever it's on the battlefield. This goes the same for a bunch of offensive Lumions that have released recently, such as Dakuda, the Ice type Roamer counterpart with its Fire type, Soulburst Eruptodon, Soulburst Stratosaur, etc, etc. There's going to be a lot of offensive competition, and when you have a Lumion like this, with a decent speed tier and a very good rage attack stat but awful defenses, I find it hard for Prawnsu to actually make a meaningful splash in this metagame, mainly because it doesn't really have the X factor of swapping in. It only does have to be revenge killed or pivoted in or double swapped in order to actually get on the battle. And I think that's going to be holding it back a lot, but Let me know what you guys think. Will Prawnu be really good, or do you find this video informational? If in that case, then of course like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of these type of videos. I'll be making more Atlantean City Part 2 videos specifically on the Soul Bursts and the new Lumians. This is Cotton Soup signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.